Okay, so in this video, we're actually going to work out some basic controllers for the arms and the legs before we move on to the spine, because that will sort of bring it all together. So we have our deform rig. Okay, so our deform rig here is sorted. It's ready to roll. I think that's all we're going to need to add until we get to the fancy stuff with the anti-rolls and stuff like that. So we'll worry about that later. But what we can work with for the time being is our FK controls and our IK controls. So what I mean by that is we're going to have to duplicate sections of our deform rig and turn them into either control joints or into mechanism joints. Now we can do that by duplicating certain sections of the body. Okay, so to get started with both the FK and IK, we need to duplicate the joint chains. So let's go ahead and select, starting from the upper arm. So from here to here, grab those, grab your legs from the thighs downwards, and then push Control D, and that will duplicate those joints. Next thing to do will be to select Shift P to unparent them from the rest of the hierarchy. So they're meant to be separate to the deform rig. Now we're going to go ahead and grab our translation and move them forward for now. I'm just going to give it a value of 50. That should do the trick. And I'm going to duplicate that once more and then move those duplicates down back. So grabbing these ones here, grab that, translate Z. Oops. Let's go to world view. There we go. I should be able to move those back now like that. Great. And again, we can give that a translation of minus 53. Great. Or minus 50, whatever you prefer. All right, cool. So we have our duplicates. One side will be our FK and one side will be our IK. Now, I would prefer to give you some logic here. So I'm planning on making the arms on this side IK and the legs at the front IK, and then the arms at the front FK and the legs at the back FK. Reason being is that we're going to be building some pole vectors that will be shooting out from the knees and the elbows. So we want to be able to sort of have some space to do that. So let's go ahead and rename all of these joints to have the appropriate naming convention. So obviously for this side, I want to give them a designation of FK. So what we can do is just select the hierarchy here and hierarchy there, and then go to modify, prefix hierarchy names, or search and replace names even. Open up this window, and we want to replace the term DEF underscore with MCH, IK, or FK in this case, FK underscore, and set it to hierarchy so it will affect all the other limbs down the chain. Push apply, and we got ourselves a brand new renamed arm structure. What we can do now here is just remove the label number on the setup here. So just go down the hierarchy here and just remove the number 1 across all these. Now with the fingers, we don't need those. So make sure to delete the thumb, the middle finger, the ring finger, and the pinky. Delete those. We don't need them anymore. Do the same thing on the other side as well. So starting from the thumb, index, middle, ring, pinky, delete those. So we should only need the actual joint chain for the arm itself. Okay, so if you have any other numbers just lying around, just go ahead and either remove them or just make sure they're all the same kind of number. So here I'm just going to just remove them. Great. So same thing over here. In this case, for the thighs, I'm actually going to give it the prefix IK, so I'll skip that for now and just go to the back legs here. Do the same thing over here and remove the numbers. Again, in this case though, we aren't going to delete anything down the toes because they're actually quite useful to have. we're going to build out a fully fledged FK control rig down the leg, because there's no fingers or anything like that that need to follow both parts of the limbs. The setup will be fine as is. So again, go ahead and that's interesting. Somehow my calf got replaced, so I'm just going to bring that back up. I'll fix that in a second. So FK foot, go back into that. Not sure why that happened. So yeah, there we go. Perfect. Okay, cool. Now for the IK, it's the same thing. So just grab the remaining joint chains. So these ones here, replace it with MCH IK. So MCH stands for mechanical. So just using those, push apply, and then do the same thing here. So just go through and remove any unneeded numbering, stuff like that. And again, for the fingers, we don't need those anymore. So make sure to delete those on the setups here as well. So from the thumb, index, middle, ring, pinky, delete. Same thing over here, thumb, index, middle, ring, pinky, delete. Great. All right, so to make this a little bit more organized for us as well, we're going to arrange our layers so we actually have a FK and IK group. That will just make it a lot easier to, organize, like just turn things off and on so we don't get too distracted. So grabbing the MCH IK for the thigh and the arm. Let's collapse those. Oops. Oh, interesting. Okay. With those selected, we're going to add a brand new layer. So layers, go to create new layer from shape. Oops, undo, and give it a color. So in this case, I'm going to give it a blue color, so I can actually visualize this stuff pretty easily, or I can just turn them off and not worry about them right now. These ones here, again, select the hierarchy and add a new layer. Give it a color. I'm going to give it a green color. That'll do for now. And also make sure to name these things. So I'm going to call this one FK. And this one IK. We can always delete the layers later, but for now, it's just helping us to organize things appropriately. All right, I'm going to keep the IK turned off for now, but you can always bring it back if you need to. And we're just going to focus on the FK controls for the time being. Okay, so setting up FK is pretty damn simple. What we need to do is basically create a control setup, so an organizational and control setup that has a parent null or a parent locator that drives the offsets of our joints, and then we have a control underneath it to drive the rig. So it's a really simple setup, and then we just have to figure out our hierarchies. So let's go ahead and get that out the way right now. So let's go ahead and create a null. Now you could go ahead and use an empty group for this, but for those starting out for the first time, I think this is fucking stupid because you lose track of stuff so quickly. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a locator and then give it a scale of around 3 or 4, just so we can actually click on it. Maybe 4 would be better. And that will be our parent object for our controller. This will also allow us to create our offsets. So I'm going to save that for now. And then I'm going to create a circle, which will represent our FK control. So it's going to create a control curve like so. And I might make it a little bit bigger like that and apply the scale. Actually, make it a perfect 5. That will do. And then apply the scale for the time being. All right. Now, I always like to make it a little bit clearer to animators what the primary axis or the primary rotation is. This is completely optional, but if you prefer to try it out, I'd highly suggest it. we're going to create an extra piece of curve to sort of represent our middle plane. So basically where our primary axis of rotation will be, I want to sort of show what that is. That way, when we go to rotate it along Y, rotate the control along Y, you'll actually know that you've actually done it, because with a perfect circle, it's so hard to tell. So what we're going to do is grab a path using the EP curve tool, double click on that, and set the curve degree to 1 linear. And then using snapping on the grid, I'm going to draw a line, 1 and 2, just like that. And you'll see we have a perfect line that can be sort of embedded into this shape. Now, if you want to merge these two together, it's a little bit trickier than just, grabbing the shape or grabbing the line and then making a child of that shape, because we ultimately want to be able to control it from either this one or this one. And if they're separate, then we can't, determine which one's controlling the rig. So what we need to do is actually embed this shape curve or this shape property into this object itself. So basically how the way that Maya operates is that in the attribute editor, you may have wondered why we have the curve and then the curve shape. Well, the actual answer to this is that the curve object itself is essentially a folder. It's a container for the curve data or the object data. So what you can do is essentially transfer the object data into any other object group. So what we're going to do is transfer this object data into this object itself. And of course, I'm going to go ahead and delete the history on that one. So go to edit and make sure you only do delete by type, not by all by type. So history. What we're going to do is grab this curve and then transfer it into this curve object. So the way to do that is to enable in the outliner display and enable shapes. And by doing that, you'll see that basically every object has become a folder of sorts with this little plus icon. And if we click on this, you can see the curve shape data. And when we expand it, the curve itself basically becomes a folder or a group. So what we can do is select the curve shape, then control select the curve group of the circle. And in here at the bottom of our window here, you may see this little mail script thing. We can actually type in the following: parent -r-s. And as long as your transforms have all been frozen, it will transfer perfectly into that shape. And now if I select the NURB circle, both lines or both curves have been transferred and are selectable as a single object. We can now go ahead and delete that curve, the bottom one. And now if we go to our display and turn off shapes, we can now select it like from both lines. So basically it's both selectable. But the nice thing about this visualization, however, is that when I go to rotate my arm, you can tell how much has been rotated with this little line. And I love that about this sort of setup. So now what I'm going to do is just go ahead and rename this as Control FK arm. Let's go upper arm for now. Upper arm underscore L. We'll fix up everything else later on. Cool. Now we're just going to go ahead and embed or make this a child of our locator. So just go ahead and drag that into there with the middle mouse button, make that a child of locator, and rename this locator as ORG for organization, FK upper arm underscore L. And that will be our sort of control setup for basically the entirety of this rig. Now, the reason why I've moved my arms and legs back and forth is just that it's so much easier to determine which parts of the body you're working with. And we can always move those joints back later on. Because they aren't going to deform the rig, it shouldn't affect how we're going to make this thing operate. All right, cool. So the next thing to do is just grab the locator, grab our IK control or FK control at the top here, go to modify, match transforms, I'm going to keep that open, and match all transforms. Now, the cool thing about this is that once we've done this, the locator itself has taken on all the transform properties or the transform data from our joint here. So basically, it's creating all the offsets we need to get a super clean orientation for our FK control. So if we were to say, I'm going to move this across just a tad, just for now, you'll see here all the transforms are gone. But if we go ahead and just bring that open, and then select the joint here and select the control here, and then go to display, transform properties, local rotation axes, you'll notice that now both our arm and our control have the exact same orientation. So we've inheriting the joint orientation to our controller through our locator. So the locator is taking on all those properties that will then freeze away and hide away. But our controller will seemingly be perfect for our rig. And now we can then use the connection editor to align our rig with no offsets at all and control the rotation of our arm. So that's how we're going to operate with this whole setup. So I'm going to go ahead and reset the position of that controller. And then now I'm just going to go ahead and size this up a little bit to sort of match our arm. Like so. And then I'm just going to go ahead and freeze the transforms. There we go. Awesome. So that's enough size for us to work with in our arm. Now, the next task really is to just go ahead and duplicate, duplicate all of the needed control points. So basically any joint that we have in the system here, both in the arms and the legs, we can go ahead and just duplicate this and match the transforms. So make sure that when you're doing this, that you're matching the transforms with the locator. So the locator is what's going to be driving the offsets. Like so. And as you can see, with the local transforms, they're fully aligned accordingly. So just go ahead and do that for all of these joints. So the legs, the knees, the feet, the toes, and ignore the end point there. We don't need them there. But for the arms and the legs, we can go ahead and just do that right now. All right, so once we've got that done, go ahead and make sure that if you've made any scale attributes to your controllers, the controllers, not the locators, just the controllers, that you go ahead and freeze the transforms on those curves. All right, so just go ahead and just freeze those transforms. Otherwise, you're going to end up with such horrible fucking offsets that you're going to want to rip your hair out and you're just going to give up on the whole the whole rigging process. So just make sure that everything's nice and clean. All the scale attributes have been frozen out and we should be good to go from here on in. All right, so now it's just a matter of going through the controllers now and making sure that everything has been named appropriately. So just go ahead and do that right now. All right, so now that everything's been renamed and everything is clean, you can see here everything has got their appropriate naming convention. So making sure that everything is really, really well described is really, really important. So you'll see here that we want to try and make sure that everything is just basically perfect. All right, so you can see here I made a mistake. I'm going to make sure that's set to a right-handed side arm. So stuff like that. So you got to be really careful about all these naming conventions. So make sure that they're all exactly how they need to be, and you shouldn't run into any issues going forward. So yeah, once you've got that running, we are now ready to build up the hierarchy. Now the hierarchy is really simple. So basically, you want to start backwards. So starting from the hand and starting from the locator, not the controller, you want to basically make the locator a child of the previous controller up the chain. So locator to controller, P. Locator to controller, P. So basically you should have a hierarchy like this, where we have our offset group, which is our locator, then our controller, offset group, controller, offset group, controller. So let's go ahead and do that for the entirety of all our different controls. So starting with the offset group on the other side, go ahead, select the controller, push P. All right, so here we have it. We have our control group ready to roll for FK. So really simple setup. Now you can see we have a left side group and a right side group, which is just what we need. And now we're ready to basically get these bones to be driven by our controllers. So what we need to do is just open up the connection editor now. And we're going to connect the rotation properties of these joints to our controllers. So really simple stuff. We're going to go ahead and do that right now. And this is why it was super important to make sure we got those controllers aligned perfectly with our joints. And that's what the offset groups are all about. So what the offset groups are basically these locators. The controllers now are perfectly aligned with these bones. So now we just have to go ahead and make sure that when we connect our bones that it is actually working. So we're going to go ahead and select our first control here, reload left. I'm going to select the joint here, reload right, look for rotation. So where the hell are we? There's our rotate. And we're going to look for rotation over here. So we're going to take the output rotation and input it into our rotation of the bones. And if we're lucky and we go ahead and rotate the arm now, you will see that we have perfect zero offset rotation going on in the arm, which is exactly what we want. That's what those offset groups are all about. And that's why we want to align these controls absolutely perfectly. That way we didn't have to rely on constraints with offsets to add extra calculations. So right now it's working exactly as I want. All I got to do now is just go through the entire joint chain now and repeat the process. So selecting the controller now, not the locator, select the bone, and then hook up rotation, do a little test, and you'll see it's working like a treat. Again, reload left, reload right, location or rotation to rotation. So that one hasn't been reloaded properly. So reload right. There we go. And hook that up, and you should see able to see it again. If we're lucky, the bone is moving with the controller. So now just go ahead and do that with the entirety of our rig, and we should be ready to roll with the FK. That should be done. All right, so that's completely done now. So all the FK controls are working like a treat. They're doing exactly what I want them to do. And the great thing about what we talked about in the past with the arms is that the rotation orders are all the same as well. So X, Y, Z. So we don't have to worrying about those offsets for the time being. But everything is working to plan, which is exactly what we need. Okay, so We can now move on to the IK controls, but first let's go ahead and just group these together. So we're going to grab these groups of controllers and joints, and we're going to go ahead and select the select the FK bones as well in our hierarchy. And we're just going to go ahead and group them together. So Control G to group those together and call it FK control group for now. Now, in the future, we may want to separate this out a little bit further, but for the time being, that's exactly what we need. And if we want to now, we can go ahead and just place them into the FK group itself here too. So whether you want to do that, it's up to you. I'm just going to go ahead and hide them for now because I don't want the controls to turn green. So I'm just going to go ahead and hide them away and bring back our IK controls. So just grab that. There we go. Fantastic. We are now ready to move on to the IK.